are moments in life where you feel like giving up isn't just an option, it feels like the only option. When the weight gets heavy, when the doors keep closing, when your prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling and you're left wondering, God, where are you? But I came to tell you something today. Just because it's hard doesn't mean it's over. Just because it's silent doesn't mean he's absent. And just because it's delayed doesn't mean it's denied. God has a plan, and not just any plan, but a plan that includes you, your pain, your detours, your tears, and even your silence. You're not just wandering, you're being woven. You're not just surviving, you're being shaped. So I need you to keep pushing. Not because you feel strong, but because he's not done. Push through the fear, push through the doubt, push through the depression, push through the waiting, because God has a plan, and every push is pulling you closer. His promised pain is one of the greatest teachers in your life. Not because it feels good, not because it's fair or makes sense, but because God knows how to use what was meant to break you, to build you. Pain is never just about the moment. It's about the message. It's about the molding. It's about the making. The enemy wants to convince you that the pain you're feeling is the end of your story, that the brokenness means you're finished, that the betrayal means you're forgotten. But God never wastes pain. He turns it into pressure. And that pressure is what pushes purpose out of you. See, purpose doesn't come in comfort. Purpose doesn't grow in ease. Purpose is pressed out of you when the weight gets heavy, when your back is against the wall, when you have nothing left but a prayer and a promise. It's in the pain that you learn who God really is. It's in the pain that your worship becomes real. It's in the pain that you stop relying on your strength and start leaning into his. When a woman is giving birth, pain is part of the process, not because something is wrong, but because something is coming. The pain is evidence that there's life inside of her fighting to come forward. And in the same way, the pain in your life right now might not be the end. It might just be the beginning of something God is pushing out of you. Dreams you buried, gifts you hid, faith you didn't know you had. But the enemy wants to weaponize your pain. He wants to turn it into bitterness, into shame, into isolation. He wants you to believe that because it hurts, it means God has left you. But can I remind you of something? Jesus felt pain, deep, excruciating pain. On the cross, he cried out in agony, not because he lost faith, but because he was walking in purpose. Pain doesn't mean you're off course. Sometimes it means you're right where you're supposed to be. There are some seasons in your life that will only make sense in hindsight. You'll look back and say, if it hadn't hurt, I wouldn't have healed. If it hadn't broken me, I wouldn't have built what I did. If they hadn't walked away, I wouldn't have learned to walk with God. That's what pain does when you surrender it to the hands of a good God. It stops being a prison and starts becoming a platform. God never promised us a painless life, but he did promise us his presence. He promised that nothing would be wasted. And that means your heartbreak is not wasted. Your loss is not wasted. Your sleepless nights, your unanswered prayers, your lonely moments, they are not wasted. They are being gathered, collected, and used by the one who sees all, knows all, and redeems all. Some of you have been asking, why does it hurt so bad if I'm doing what God asked me to do? Let me tell you, obedience doesn't cancel pain. Obedience invites pressure. And that pressure is necessary because it pushes out what comfort never could. It reveals the oil in you. It stirs up the anointing. It exposes the idols. It clarifies the mission. And it reminds you that what you're carrying is too precious to be birthed without resistance. Don't mistake the pressure as punishment. Don't assume the pain means something's gone wrong. See, sometimes it means everything is going right. It means you're growing. It means your roots are going deeper. It means you're being stretched into the version of yourself you prayed for. You said you wanted to be strong. Well, strength comes through struggle. You said you wanted to trust God more. Well, trust grows when you have nothing else to rely on. This season of pressure is not working against you. It's working for you. That pain is not your enemy. It might be your midwife. The tears you cried, They watered the seeds you didn't even know were planted. The silence you endured, it built the patience that will sustain your promise. The rejection you faced, it cleared the space for divine connection. Pain has a purpose, even if it's not clear yet. God is a refiner. He doesn't throw you into fire to destroy you. He uses it to purify you, to burn away what can't go with you into your neck, to prepare you for the weight of the blessing. Because some blessings are so heavy, you need strength you didn't know you had. And pain is what develops that strength. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. You're not being overlooked, you're being overhauled. And it doesn't feel good, but it's producing good. It's producing perseverance, it's producing endurance, it's producing faith. You're being pushed, yes, push hard, but not to the edge of defeat. You're being pushed into purpose. So don't quit in the pain. Don't stop pushing because it hurts. The pressure is necessary. The fire is refining, and the pain, though real, is temporary. But what is producing in you? That's eternal. That's legacy. That's purpose. There's a sacred weight to God's silence. It's not the kind of silence that abandons you. It's the kind that develops you. It's the pause between what you prayed for and what he promised. It's the tension between the seed and the harvest. And if you don't know how to sit in the silence, you'll start interpreting God's quietness as rejection instead of preparation. But the truth is, God's silence is often the very space where faith is stretched, matured, and made unshakable. When you're in the silence, your emotions start searching for meaning. You ask questions like, did I hear him right? Is he even listening? Was I wrong to trust him? And the enemy slips in during that moment, trying to fill the silence with lies. He wants to tell you that because God hasn't moved, he never will. That because you can't hear him, he must have turned away. But that's not how your Father operates. Silence doesn't mean absence. Silence means strategy. Silence means God is working behind the curtain while he teaches you how to stand without crutches. In the silence, God is watching not how loud your praise is, but how rooted your trust is. He's not interested in surface level faith that only shows up when everything's going right. He's building something deeper in you, a faith that can carry weight, a faith that doesn't panic when the heavens seem quiet, a faith that doesn't need goosebumps to stay grounded. When you can still believe even when you hear nothing, that's faith. When you can still obey when there's no affirmation, that's maturity. When you can still worship while you're waiting, that's trust. Because faith doesn't grow in the shout, it grows in the stillness. It grows when you're pacing your living room at 3 a.m. wondering why the breakthrough hasn't come yet, and you choose to lift your hands anyway, not because it makes sense, but because you know his character even when you can't trace his hand. You see, if God spoke every time you were uncertain, you'd start depending on confirmation more than obedience. And God is more interested in developing you than impressing you. He wants you to grow into the kind of believer who doesn't just need a word, who becomes the word in motion. He wants to develop in you the kind of stability that doesn't shake when things don't go your way. There's something holy about the in-between. The space between promise and fulfillment. It's where the Israelites wandered. It's where Joseph was in prison. It's where David ran for his life. It's where Jesus stayed silent before the cross. God has always done his deepest work in the middle of silence. And if you'll lean into it, if you won't run from it, you'll begin to realize that the silence isn't punishment, it's preparation. Some of the greatest revelations are born out of seasons of quiet. When your ears are no longer tuned to the noise of the world, you begin to hear the subtleties of the Spirit. You start recognizing that not all movement is visible, that not all answers are loud, that not all growth is public. God is developing you in silence so that when he releases you into purpose, you'll be able to handle it without falling apart. The silence is stretching you. It's teaching you to lean, to listen, to wait. It's increasing your capacity to carry what's next. Because if you can remain faithful in the silence, you'll be able to remain humble in the spotlight. If you can stay grounded when no one's watching, you'll stay anchored when everyone is. And sometimes God is quiet because he's already spoken. He's waiting for you to trust what he already said before he says something new. He's waiting for you to walk out the last word before he reveals the next step. You don't need a new prophecy, you need patience. You don't need a new vision, you need to steward the one he gave you. That's where trust is tested. That's where loyalty is proven. Not when you have clarity, but when you only have a command. Not when you feel secure, but when you're walking on water in the middle of a storm, and the only thing holding you up is a word you can't even hear anymore. Silence forces you to remember, to go back to what he already told you, to rehearse the promises he made, to lean into the truth of who he is, because even when you can't hear him, you know his character. And that's what keeps you steady. Faith stretched in silence becomes faith that can stand storms. Faith that can wait years without giving up. Faith that doesn't need to beg for proof because it already knows the heart of the Father. And that kind of faith confuses the enemy because he's banking on your need to feel something. But when you walk through silence and still say, I trust you, you take the power out of his hands and put it back into God's. So no, God's silence doesn't mean he's absent. It means he's doing something so deep, so intimate, and so important that words would only get in the way. He's stretching your faith not to break you, but to prepare you. Because what's coming requires a version of you that isn't shaken by the quiet, but empowered by it. There comes a point in every journey where the road you thought you were supposed to take suddenly becomes blocked. You had the plan mapped out, you were ready, you were focused, you were moving forward with faith, and then, without warning, the path shifted. A door closed, a person left, an opportunity dried up, and now you find yourself standing in the middle of a detour wondering, God, did I miss you? But what if I told you the detour isn't a mistake, it's a miracle in disguise? Because in God's kingdom, a detour is never it's a divine redirection, a rerouting of your steps to lead you into something better, deeper, and more aligned with your calling than what you originally planned. We serve a God who doesn't just guide our paths, he orchestrates them. He sees the turns before we reach them. He knows the traffic ahead. He knows where the enemy set trash. And sometimes the only way to protect you from a crash is to redirect you with a detour. It might feel like rejection, but it's really protection. It might feel like a setback, but it's setting the stage for something you couldn't have built on your own. Look at the story of Joseph. He had a dream at 17, a vision from God that he would lead, that he would rise, that he would be elevated. But instead of heading straight into destiny, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, falsely accused and forgotten in prison. From the outside looking in, it looked like one detour after another. But those detours were divinely timed. Every turn was an assignment. Every wrong turn was part of the right plan. By the time Joseph stepped into Pharaoh's palace, he wasn't just a boy with a dream. He was a man who had been processed, humbled, refined, and made ready. Sometimes the direct route isn't the safest route. Sometimes the shortest distance between promise and purpose is not a straight line, it's a wilderness. It's a series of divine delays that refine your character, build your discernment, and stretch your obedience. If God took you straight to your destiny, your gift might arrive, but your soul might not be ready. And God loves you too much to give you a blessing you can't sustain. A detour is not a sign that God has abandoned you. It's a sign that God is guiding you. Because while you're worried about how long it's taking, God is focused on what he's building in you while you wait. The detour is shaping your identity, burning away your idols, and realigning your motives. It's removing people who can't go with you. It's closing doors that would have distracted you. It's placing you in rooms where you'll learn to depend not on the plan, but on his presence. Sometimes God disrupts your schedule to protect his strategy. You may have thought that job was the destination. You may have believed that relationship was the promise. But what if God allowed it to fall apart because it was a counterfeit? What if he rerouted you so he could reintroduce you to yourself? So he could elevate your thinking, heal your trauma, and make you whole, not just successful. Detours force you to pause, to reevaluate, to ask God, where are you leading me? And it's in that space of surrender where you discover clarity you never had before. Because the detour slows you down long enough to hear the still small voice. Makes you aware of what you were rushing past. And in that awareness you grow. You begin to see God's hand even in what felt like a breakdown. You realize that every interruption was actually an invitation to deeper intimacy. God doesn't waste time. He doesn't lead you in circles for no reason. If he takes you the long way, it's because he's doing a long work. He's not just opening doors. He's preparing you to walk through them. Because breakthrough without preparation becomes a burden. Success without surrender becomes idolatry. God's redirection is his way of anchoring you before he elevates you. And here's what I love. God doesn't get lost in the detour. He doesn't look at your situation and say, oh no, I didn't see that coming. He's the GPS that recalculates without panic. He knew before you did where the road would split. He knew that betrayal was coming. He knew the deal would fall through. And he already planned another route, one that still gets you to the promise, but transforms you along the way. So stop thinking the detour disqualified you. Stop believing the lie that you missed your moment. If God has you rerouted, it's because the road you were on wasn't meant to carry the full weight of your calling. He's setting you up for sustainability, for longevity, for legacy. And the only thing he's asking of you is trust. You may not understand the steps, but you can trust the shepherd. You may not see the full picture, but you can walk in obedience. Because even in the detour, there is destiny. Even in the unfamiliar, there is grace. And even in what looks like a delay, there is divine acceleration waiting on the other side. Setbacks are often misinterpreted as evidence that something has gone wrong, that you're out of God's will, or that you're being punished. But in the kingdom of God, setbacks are not the end of the story. They are strategic turning points. They are divine setups for something greater, something deeper, something clearer than you could have discovered without the disruption. Every closed door, every betrayal, every detour, every delay has the potential to pull something new out of you, to realign your heart, and to reveal what you couldn't see when everything was going right. The truth is, sometimes progress doesn't look like movement. It looks like being stopped long enough for God to adjust your direction. Sometimes you don't realize how far you've drifted until the setback halts your momentum and forces you to look at where you are. That's where realignment begins. It's not punishment, it's precision. God allows the setback so he can pull you back into alignment with the truth, the mission, the identity that got buried under your ambition, your schedule, or your people pleasing. You thought you were walking into a promotion, but the opportunity disappeared at the last minute. You thought the relationship was forever, but they left without warning. You thought you were finally stable, but then the bottom fell out. And in the middle of all that loss and confusion, God wasn't just watching, he was working. He was revealing things about your foundation, about your inner circle, about your patterns. A setback stripped away the illusion so that truth could surface. You were building, but not all of it was on him. And rather than letting it collapse later, he allowed it to break now, when he could still rebuild you from a stronger place. Revelation rarely comes when you're winning. It comes when you're wounded. It comes when you're quiet. It comes when the distractions fade and all you have is raw, unfiltered honesty with God. That's when he starts showing you what you've been blind to. That's when you realize the person you thought you needed was blocking your growth. The dream you were chasing was costing you your peace. The habit you were clinging to was hiding your healing. Setbacks have a way of shaking you out of spiritual numbness and waking you up to what really matters. And that's the setup, because once the veil lifts, once the false support systems are exposed, God begins the process of realignment. He reorders your priorities. He resets your focus. He restores your identity, not based on what you do or what you have or who likes you, but based on who you really are in him. That kind of clarity is only born in the aftermath of a shakeup. And don't miss this. Realignment is uncomfortable because it means releasing what you thought you needed. It means saying goodbye to certain versions of yourself. It means letting go of timelines, surrendering control, and sometimes disappointing people who were never supposed to shape your direction. But in that place of surrender, you begin to see what you were missing while you were grinding, performing, and striving. You start to experience what it's like to be led, not just driven. The setback becomes sacred when you realize it's not rejection, it's redirection. God is not trying to embarrass you. He's trying to empower you. He's not trying to block you. He's trying to bless you. But he has to bring your heart back into agreement with his plan before he can release the next level of your purpose. He can't elevate what's out of alignment. He can't anoint what's out of order. And so he allows the fall not to shame you, but to save you from building a life that looks successful, but is spiritually bankrupt. Some of the greatest people in Scripture experienced devastating setbacks right before divine assignments. Moses was rejected by his people and exiled before God called him to deliver a nation. Esther was orphaned and overlooked before she was crowned queen. Paul was struck blind before he received revelation. Jesus was crucified before resurrection. The pattern is clear. The fall precedes the rise. The setback precedes the strategy, and the breaking precedes the blessing. So if you're in the middle of a setback, don't assume you're off course. Don't let the disappointment convince you that your story is over. Instead, lean in. Ask God, what are you trying to show me? Pay attention to what's being revealed. Watch how he begins to gently pull you back into alignment. The connections that fall away, the passions that reignite, the clarity that returns. It's not coincidence, it's correction. Only correction, loving correction. You didn't lose control. You were never meant to have it. You didn't lose the dream. You're being invited into a better one. The setup is that what felt like failure was actually a divine reset. What felt like rejection was a mercy move, and what felt like a breakdown was the beginning of your becoming. So trust the process. Even if you don't like how it looks right now, even if it hurts, even if you're tired, God who allowed this setback is the same God who's writing your comeback. And when he restores you, it won't be a return to who you used to be. It'll be a rebirth into who you were always meant to become. Strength is often misunderstood. We've been taught that to keep going, you have to feel strong. You have to wake up with confidence, walk tall with clarity, and show the world you've got it all together. But kingdom strength doesn't always look like power. It often looks like permission. Permission to not have all the answers. Permission to cry and keep walking. Permission to shake and still stand. Because in the kingdom, moving forward isn't about being fearless. It's about being willing to trust, willing to obey, willing to take one step even when you're terrified. God never required you to feel strong. He never said only the confident qualify. He never asked you to be invincible. He asked you to be available. What he's looking for is not your perfection, but your permission. He's looking for someone who will say, God, I'm scared, I'm broken, I'm tired, but if you're calling me, I'll go. That kind of surrender, that's where supernatural strength steps in. That's where grace begins to carry what your emotions can't. It's easy to believe that moving forward means waiting until the pain is gone. But healing is often in the walking. God didn't wait for the Israelites to feel whole in the wilderness before he parted the Red Sea. He told them to move, and it was their movement that triggered the miracle. The breakthrough didn't happen at the beginning. It happened in the middle of their willingness. And that's what he's asking of you. Not to be sure, not to be strong, but to be willing. Sometimes the greatest act of faith isn't climbing the mountain. It's getting out of bed. It's sending the application. It's saying no when your whole body wants to say yes. It's choosing not to go back to what's familiar, even though it feels safer than the unknown. That willingness is an act of war against the lies that say you have to be ready, healed, or fully confident. You don't. You just have to trust that God is walking with you while you walk it out. You won't always feel like a warrior. Sometimes you'll feel like the woman who just barely touched the hem of his garment. But Jesus didn't look for her strength. He responded to her faith. Your willingness to reach when you're weak is the very thing that moves heaven. It's what turns moments of doubt into testimonies of deliverance. God specializes in working through the willing. Gideon was hiding when God called him mighty warrior. Moses was stuttering when God sent him to Pharaoh. Jeremiah was too young. Ruth was too foreign. David was too small. But they were willing. They said yes through their fear. They moved forward without the certainty of outcomes, and in that obedience, they discovered strength they didn't even know they had. You don't need to feel qualified to say yes. You don't need to feel brave to take the next step. All you need is a heart that says, God, I trust you more than I trust my fear. Because feelings are temporary, but obedience builds legacy. Emotions rise and fall, but faith moves mountains. Not when you're sure, but when you're surrendered. Moving forward while feeling weak doesn't make you less spiritual. It makes you more real. It makes you dangerous to the enemy. Because the enemy expects your weakness to paralyze you. He expects your insecurity to silence you. He expects your fatigue to disqualify you. But when you move anyway, you confuse hell when you push. Through the fog, through the anxiety, through the heartbreak. You prove that grace is not a concept, it's a force. God doesn't need your strength. He is your strength. He just needs your yes. He needs your movement. He needs your obedience, even if your knees are trembling. You may not know what's on the other side of this push, but what you can know is this: He's there. His plan is still intact. His presence is still with you. And his power is made perfect, not in your best moments, but in your weakest ones. So don't wait to feel strong before you move. Just move. Just breathe. Just whisper his name. Just lift your eyes. Because every step you take, even if it's messy, even if it's slow, even if it's tear-stained, is a step of faith. And faith is what God responds to. Not feelings, not performance, not perfection, just faith. Just willingness, just you showing up one more time, saying, God, I don't feel strong, but I'm still here. And that's enough for him to work with. That's enough to split seas. That's enough to break chains. That's enough to change generations. Because willingness is the soil where miracles grow. The middle is where most people quit. Not because they lack faith, but because they didn't realize how long faith would have to last. The excitement of the beginning fades, the adrenaline wears off, the vision gets blurred, and you're left in the tension between what God promised and what you see. The middle is messy. It's full of questions, delays, silence, confusion. But the middle is not a mistake. It's a molding ground. It's where God refines, shapes, stretches, and strengthens you so that you're not just ready for the promise, you're ready to carry it without collapsing. When you're in the middle, it's easy to wonder if you heard God wrong. You remember what he spoke over you, what he stirred in your spirit. You stepped out in obedience. You left behind what was safe. You said yes to the uncomfortable, but now nothing looks like what you expected. And in that space, the enemy comes to whisper lies. Maybe you missed it. Maybe you made this up. Maybe God changed his mind. But God is not a man that he should lie. He's not fickle. He doesn't start something in your life and then forget about it. What he began, he's committed to finish. The Bible says he is the author and the finisher of our faith, not just the author. That means he's present in the plot twists, in the tension, in the chapters that don't make sense yet. He knew you'd cry in chapter 6 before the victory in chapter 10. He wrote the ending before you ever saw the beginning. And the middle, as painful and unclear as it may feel, is still in his hand. You're not lost. You're being led through the wilderness, through the waiting, through the war inside your own heart. Don't underestimate the power of persistence in the middle. Some of your greatest growth is happening underground, invisible to others. Roots are forming, depth is being built, character is developing. If God gave you the fulfillment of the promise without the formation of your spirit, the blessing would break you. So the middle is mercy. The delay is not denial, it's divine development. You might not see the finish line yet, but God does. You might not feel progress, but heaven sees momentum. Every tear you cry, every prayer you whisper when no one's around, every time you choose to trust instead of quit, it's all counted, it's all seen. And it's all part of what God is building through you. He's not just preparing the blessing for you. He's preparing you for the blessing. If you stop in the middle, you'll never see how he turns mourning into dancing, how he transforms ashes into beauty. The enemy wants you to give up now because he knows what's waiting on the other side if you keep going. He knows your legacy is tied to your endurance. He knows your testimony will shake others out of complacency. So he presses hardest in the middle because he knows you're closer than you think. Don't make a permanent decision in a temporary season. Don't walk away from the promise just because the process feels too heavy. Instead, remind yourself who wrote your story. Remind yourself what he's already done. Remind yourself that if he brought you this far, he's not about to drop you now. He's the same God in the valley as he was on the mountaintop. He's still present. He's still working. He's still faithful. You don't have to figure everything out. You just have to stay. Stay in the fight. Stay in position. Stay believing because God finishes what he starts. He finishes healing. He finishes calling. He finishes the restoration. He finishes what he plants in your spirit, even when it looks like nothing is growing. The middle might not feel like a miracle, but that's where miracles are made. And if you'll keep walking, even if it's slow, even if it's painful, you'll eventually see what he was building all along. You'll look back and realize the middle wasn't wasted. It was where you were made into the person who could carry the weight of what's coming. So don't stop. Don't shrink. Don't give up. What God started in you, he will finish. And when he does, you'll understand why the middle felt so hard. It was preparing you to finish strong.